now we will start with the physics of braking actually. So to start with the topic, I'll just write two things over here. One is kinetic energy and one is potential energy. So if you see what happens during the braking, one form of energy is converted into the another form of energy. So as far as all of us know, the kinetic energy is converted into potential energy. So the amount of energy which your vehicle is carrying at that time, the brakes stop that energy and convert it into the heat energy, basically kinetic energy into heat energy. So the kinetic energy of vehicle is half mv square, where m is the mass of the vehicle and v is the velocity of the vehicle at which it's traveling. One thing. The other thing is heat energy. Heat energy is mc delta T, where m is the mass, c is the specific heat coefficient, and delta T is the rise in temperature. Rise in temperature of the brake rotor actually. All right. So this is what happens when you apply the brake in your vehicle. So I'll just draw a few things over here and we'll just see how exactly the brakes work in your vehicle. Suppose this is the brake pedal. Now this is directly connected to the master cylinder. The brake pedal basically pushes a piston which is connected to the master cylinder. And your master cylinder just contains the fluid inside it, and it further divides the fluid into the brake fluid lines. Those are connected to the calipers. And the caliper and rotor assembly, it is attached to your wheel. Similarly in here, so suppose this is front and this is rear. All right. So what do you do when you press the brake pedal? What do? You push the fluid from the master cylinder to the caliper, and this caliper, when this fluid, extra fluid, reaches the caliper, it pushes the piston inside the caliper. This is a brake rotor, and this complete assembly is your caliper. This is your caliper, and this part is the rotor. The caliper has piston inside it, and brake shoes are attached to the pistons. So what happens when the fluid is pushed, the extra fluid is pushed inside the caliper, this piston actuates and it pushes the brake shoes, and the brake shoe hold the rotor, and due to the friction the rotor stops rotating. So rotor is directly attached either to the wheel or the drive shaft. So stopping the rotor basically stops the wheel. All right. So moving further in the discussion, let us just take the real case scenario when your driver can exert X amount of force. So let's start designing the brake as per the driver's requirement. So you need to know how much maximum force your driver can apply on the brake pedal. So force applied by the driver. And now how to calculate that? Just ask your driver to sit in that particular manner in which he will be sitting on the vehicle, and ask him to apply the force as if he is pressing the clutch, pressing the brake pedal in the actual case scenario. I mean, suppose this is your quad. All right. And somewhere over here, the driver is sitting, and this is driver's leg. Somewhere over here comes his foot. So ask your driver to sit as if he is driving the quad, and ask him to apply the force on the brake pedal, and this brake pedal will be replaced by a weighing scale. So suppose, consider this in a more simpler form. Place a weighing scale over here as if this is the brake pedal, and now ask the driver to apply the force. Read the value on the weighing scale. Suppose it is 10 kg. So multiplied with the Newton, to convert it into Newton, and this will be the maximum force that your driver can apply. So ask, this is not 10 kg only, this may be 20 kg also, this may be 5 kg also, that depends on the driver. So this is what your driver's force is. This is how much the driver can apply without any problems. So now it is time to multiply this force with the leverage, brake pedal. So the leverage is basically ratio of lengths of the lever before and after the pivot point. So L1, L2. Okay. So suppose the pedal ratio is 6:1. So whatever the force you got it over here will be multiplied by this ratio. So now this force will be pedal force. L2 is to L1, which is 6:1, which is again 6. So whatever the pedal ratio is, that will be multiplied by the force that your driver can apply on the system. Now case 1 happened. Now you know, since it is fluid and since the master cylinder and caliper they are connected through a fluid line, and the fluid is non-compressible as per its property. As per the definition of the fluid, it's non-compressible. So whatever the pressure is here, the same pressure would be here in the caliper also. So pressure inside the master cylinder will be equal to pressure inside the caliper. Am I right or not? So if this pressure is equal, so inside the master cylinder, can we say P master cylinder will be equal to F upon A, force inside the master cylinder upon area of the master cylinder. Now, what will be the force inside the master cylinder? That will be the pedal force. Whatever the amount of force that driver exerted and you multiplied with the leverage, so that same force will be transferred to the master cylinder. That with this much of force, sorry, this much of force will be available inside the master cylinder. Now you know the area of the master cylinder since you have selected it. So you know the area of the master cylinder. You will get the value of the pressure from here. All right. So pressure is calculated. Now you know pressure inside the master cylinder is equal to pressure inside the caliper. So this will be the same value. Now you can calculate the force inside the caliper. What will be the force inside the caliper? Pressure or pressure inside the tandem master cylinder or pressure inside the caliper, they both are equal into area of the caliper. So this will be the force inside the caliper. Now, since you know that there are two brake pads or two brake shoes inside a caliper, so this clamping force which one caliper will be holding, this clamping force will be multiplied by 2. Okay, so clamping force is basically the holding force. This is your brake rotor and this is caliper. So two brake pads are acting on one caliper. One, 2. So this caliper force multiplied by 2. Okay. So we got the clamping force. Now this clamping force is supposed to be multiplied by the friction of coefficient of friction. So frictional force, how much would it be? Mu into clamp force. So that depends on this material of the brake shoe or brake pad, that how much coefficient of friction is there. So this is how you calculate the frictional force. Now since you know, you have to stop the torque, basically the torque which is present on the tire or the drive shaft. So that torque, if you produce equal and opposite torque, that so far just for a moment, so far we calculated the frictional force. This is what we have calculated. Now suppose you are designing the brake for the rear of your vehicle, and suppose you have one rigid shaft on which one rotor is working to stop the brake. So whatever the RPM this shaft is rotating, the same RPM, with the same RPM this rotor will also be rotating. So if you want to stop this rotation, if you want to stop this torque, you will need to stop this rotor first. Okay, so this is basically a torque, and over here also there is a torque. So torque at the rotor will be equal to torque at the shaft, and that all will be equal to torque on the tire. Okay, so you know how much torque is there since you know the force, and now the only thing that you need to calculate is the radius, the effective radius of your rotor. This is what you have to calculate, and this is how you can design the brakes of your vehicle. But now this is iteration 1. This is not necessary that this particular iteration will be working for you. So considering the efficiency of the brakes to be like 80% or 90%, you need to design your brakes for the vehicle. So first of all, what will you do? You will ask your driver to apply the force on the weighing scale as if he is driving the quad and he is pushing the brake pedal as per the actual case. Now you got the pedal force. Force by driver. Step 1, force by driver. Step 2, force by pedal, and which will be calculated by multiplying the ratio, pedal ratio, by the force by driver. So you will get this. Now the third point is pressure inside master cylinder. From this pressure, you will calculate force inside, number 4, force inside caliper. Number 5, you will calculate the clamping force. Number 6, you will calculate the frictional force. Number 7, you will calculate the effective radius. Now, you can calculate by multiplying these two things, you can calculate the torque at rotor. Compare this particular value with your torque at engine. Now, if your torque at rotor is larger than torque at engine or torque at drive shaft, if this torque, suppose T rotor and this is T tire, if TR is greater than T tire or T drive shaft, then your system will work, but consider the efficiency of the brakes too. Consider the losses and all. So efficiency may consider it at 0.8 or something like that, 0.8 or 0.9. Just study about these things, and this is how you can design the brakes for your vehicle. All right. I hope this is clear to you. Now for the stopping distance, what all the other things you need in the brakes is stopping distance, very easy to calculate. I think everyone can calculate it. This is the start line, this is the finish line. You know the starting speed, you know the final speed of your vehicle, you know the brakes and efficiency, everything. You know this much of distance. You can calculate the stopping distance and stopping time by using regular physics also. But to consider the slipping and all, you need to study these factors also. So the stopping distance, theoretical stopping distance, will be too much because you never know what kind of surface it is on which you are stopping the vehicle. Is it sand, is it mud, or it's the tar surface? So the theoretical values may differ from the actual, but how relevant those values are, that this is the important thing. So in brakes, we need to know the brake. As yesterday you might have seen, the Lotus suspension asked brake percentage in front. So you need to calculate the percentage of brake in front and rear, like how much part is taken by front and how much by rear. Is it like 50-50 or other than that? So you need to specify that also, like front brakes are stopping the vehicle more or the rear brakes are stopping the vehicle more. So these all the things you need to calculate and you need to show in your reports. Now moving on to the next topic, which is, just a moment, lateral load transfer and longitudinal load transfer. Before we start lateral and longitudinal load transfer, I'll just explain conditions to you. What is lateral load transfer and what is longitudinal load transfer? And well before that, we should think about the chassis stiffness. Okay, suppose this is your vehicle, front and rear, 4 tires, and you started. The first case one is acceleration. So longitudinal load transfer will happen, but from front to rear. Now case 2 is braking. The longitudinal load transfer will happen from rear to front. So these are 2 cases, and why we need to calculate this thing is very essential. Like suppose you are starting to accelerate and your vehicle lifts up from the front. So basically, if vehicle lifts up from front, it will be, since the steering is attached to the front wheels, so it will be a huge problem for you, because steering can be lost. So if you are doing that intentionally, that's not an issue. But if the vehicle is performing that action, that is, this is a wrong design. So you need to think about that. So, and at the same time, if the reverse condition happens, as of now, this is the front part and you are accelerating. If too much of load transfer takes place from front to rear, that means your front wheels will lift up. And if at the time of braking, suppose you are stopping the vehicle and your rear parts lift up. So suppose this is the ground and your rear portion lifts up off the ground. So again the same problem. The rule says stopping distance, rule says brake test, straight line, without losing control, all 4 wheels or wheels on which brakes are working must get locked. Okay, now since you observed, okay, that was fine, the first case was fine, you could just handle the first case because you are an experienced driver, suppose, for example, and you can handle this particular thing, that the wheel lifted up from the front and you just handle it, kept on going. But what if the wheels at the time of brake, the rear wheels lift up? So it will be hard for you to operate the vehicle in this condition. Moreover, it will be a DNF because this particular condition is not satisfied. The vehicle must stop in a straight line without losing control. Now you are losing control, and it's not necessary that you will be landing in a straight line. So maybe that you steered accidentally, you steered to left or right, and your just rear wheels, when they landed somewhere to the left or to the right. So it happens. So what I'm trying to say is that you should consider the longitudinal load transfer and its percentage based upon your design. Yesterday somebody asked me, what about 55 and 45 static load distribution? Now I hope you got my answer. So suppose this was 55 earlier at static load distribution. Now suppose 10 to 15% of the load transferred from front to rear or from rear to front. So this case will be a failure for your vehicle. And similarly, it will keep on happening throughout the event in many dynamic events as the track challenges the quads every now and then. So we will just see how to calculate the lateral load transfer, longitudinal load transfer. Before that, let's discuss the chassis stiffness. So chassis stiffness is basically resistance to bending or twisting. So suppose this is your chassis. It's fixed over here, it's fixed over here too, and you are putting force over here on these 2 points. So how does it react to this particular condition? How does it perform here? So the chassis is, as per its property, it must be rigid. I hope you are getting my point from rigid. So it must be having 0 degree of freedom always, since it is a structure. So if it just twists or bends very easily, then these are the dynamic conditions, you know how your vehicle will be performing during the dynamic events. So provide plenty of members, not too much also, not too much also, plenty of member, I mean sufficient members. So if I draw the side view of your chassis, something like this it will look. So this part is for driver's seat, this part for fuel tank, this for engine, this for wishbones, front wishbones, or maybe this can be straight also, that depends on your design of the suspension and arms. And this one also for wishbones. Okay, so how you provide enough members, enough and as minimum as possible, so that you can maintain the weight also, you can maintain its complexity also. So as minimum as possible at the same time, I'm telling. So this is the chassis stiffness. Like provide, if you do not provide a cross, let me first draw its front view. So it will be something like this. So this is going on till here. Okay, I'll open up a drawing for you so that you understand easily. Just hang on a moment. I'm importing the drawing to the software. Okay. So this is the side view of your chassis, this particular drawing, and this is an isometric view. So this chassis is designed for leaf fan engine. So if you see over here, and here, and here, there are 5 mounting points: 2, 3, 4, and 5, as per the mountings provided by the manufacturer, the engine. So if you see, one mounting is here, one mounting is here, one is here, and 2 are here. Okay. Now see, this part we have used for wishbones. So most of the force will be coming to this part only, and also on this part, because suspension is mounted over here and on the lower wishbone over here, and this is how the suspension is mounted. Okay. So now, if you do not provide enough members over here, so if suppose this member wasn't there, this one, so it could easily bend towards the upper side, or towards this side, towards the other side of the tire. And similarly over here, we have used this as the uh, mounting points for the wishbones, and afterwards we have provided members over here so that these members don't bend so easily, because lot of the force will be transferring to this point. So similarly, you have to design one chassis, you have to analyze it as per your requirement. If that fulfills, then that's okay, otherwise you have to redesign it. If that doesn't work, you have to provide necessary members or necessary trusses wherever required. So this is the chassis stiffness basically. Now coming to the another part, which is lateral load transfer and longitudinal load transfer. Just a moment. Okay. Longitudinal load transfer I explained you during the braking and accelerating. Now we'll calculate the expression for that also. Now let us see how does the lateral load transfer happens. So suppose this is a vehicle, it's traveling fine, and suddenly you witnessed a turn and you started turning. Suppose it is a right turn. So when you take the right turn, the load will start to transfer from the outside to the inner wheels, and because of this reason only, you will see that this side is a little compressed side and this side is a little expanded side, lifted up from the ground. If you have observed, or if you have felt anytime during the driving, so if you are taking this turn, then this wheel will be the inner wheel for you, the right, this is a right turn, so right side front wheel will be inner wheel for you, and this will be bearing most of the force. And the outside wheels will not be having that much of force, and they will be transferring the weight from their portion to the inner wheels. So this is how lateral load transfer happens. Okay, let's just import the drawing. there is a question, for what maximum speed do we need to design our braking system? Also, what maximum acceleration so that it does not lift? See, it's not about telling you the values. It's about how and how do you want to design your vehicle and what performances do you want. So what I have observed during the tests, we conduct the test at 40 to 45 kmph, but can also test the vehicle at 60 kmph by driving ourselves. So when the brake test happens, then this happens at 40 to 45 kmph. So, and if we see that wheels are brakes are a little not working, and if we see that this can be tested on a little higher speed also, so that can be done, but that is done in extremely rare cases. And to avoid lifting from the front, it involves a lot of other things also. So if even if this vehicle is having at least possible acceleration and most of the weight is in rear, so it will lift from the front during the acceleration. So it's not about the acceleration only, it's about your weight distribution also, the static weight distribution. So I'll answer the questions at the end of the session. Okay. Center of gravity we did yesterday. Okay, so this is lateral load transfer. Let me just import it into the software so that I do not need to draw the images again. So okay, we'll do the lateral load transfer first. Okay, so this is a diagram for lateral load transfer when the vehicle is taking a right turn. Just a moment. Okay, so this is the left side of the vehicle, this is right side of the vehicle, and we are looking at the vehicle from the front. So this somewhere over here is the center of gravity, and this is the centrifugal force, this is the lateral acceleration, and this case includes the center of gravity's location exactly at the center of the track width. So this is the height, vertical coordinate of the center of gravity. This is the total track width. Okay. So this includes taking moment about point O. And where is point O? This is point O. So when you take moments about point O, this will be load on the left wheel multiplied by the perpendicular distance, which is T, will be equal to load at the center of gravity multiplied by the perpendicular distance, which is T by 2, plus W into AYH. Why plus? Because it was supposed to be minus, and this WAY was already in minus. So minus minus became plus. So this is what your equation for lateral load transfer would be. So from here we can just calculate the value of WL, which will be W by 2 plus WAYH by T. I hope you got. Now what will be the change in load? Delta W will be equals to WL minus W by 2. WL minus W by 2. We consider this vehicle to be symmetric since the center of gravity was already in the center of the vehicle. So earlier equal weight was on both the sides, in left side also, in right side also. So delta W is basically WL minus WR. So WR is basically W by 2. Now put the value of WL over here, and you can calculate the change in the load. How did we do it? I will repeat it again. What did we do first? We just considered this vehicle. This is this left side, this is right side of your vehicle, and you are looking from the front of the vehicle. Now if you look on the front, this is the left wheel, this is the right wheel, and somewhere over here is your center of gravity, which is already positioned at the center of the track width. So its distance from the point O will be T by 2, since this complete track width is T. Its height is H, and this force, the centrifugal force, is minus W into AY, and this is the lateral acceleration AY. And now if you calculate moments about point O, so moments about point O will be the load on this wheel, left wheel, which is WL, multiplied by total perpendicular distance, which is T. Now this force will balance everything. W into T by 2, first term, this W, the total weight of the vehicle, which is concentrating on the center of gravity, and the perpendicular distance is T by 2. Okay. Now the third term is minus WAY into H. So already this term is in minus, so minus minus plus, we put this as plus, and this is why you got this expression for the load on the left wheel of the vehicle. Now what is delta W? Delta W is the difference of loads on in both the sides, which is delta L WL minus WR. Now since in the condition it's given that center of gravity is exactly at the center of the vehicle, so we can write it W by 2, this term, and this is WL, which you already calculated. Now place everything over here, you will get everything in terms of W. So W you already know, because that is the total weight of your vehicle. Lateral acceleration you know, height of the center of gravity you know, track width you know, you can calculate the change. Now this change convert it into the percentage. Convert it into percentage, and this will tell you how much percentage of the load has been transferred when you are taking a right or a left turn. Now, this is done. This particular case will tell you when you were designing the knuckle of your vehicle. So you were designing the knuckle of the vehicle. Now you must be wondering, what force should I take for its analysis? This is the point for upper arm. This is the point for lower arm. This is your wheel hubs fitment arrangement, a bearing basically. And somewhere over here will be your third axis for the steering. Okay. So now statically, due to its own due to the vehicle's weight, there was some force coming. So there is one case, lateral load transfer. The other case, longitudinal load transfer. Okay, so you just calculated, just now you calculated the lateral load transfers percentage or amount of load that is being transferred from one side to the other when it's taking a turn. So you add the total, which was the static load plus the change amount that has been changed. So that will give you one load to analyze. Now multiply this particular load by the factor of safety which you want to keep, and this will be the total load for your analysis. Now this is case 1. The case 2 is, now we will calculate the longitudinal load transfer, and longitudinal load transfer will give you 1%. Now you will see, after multiplying this, repeat the same case for this, like total static load and change in load multiplied by factor of safety. This will give you load 2. This gave you load 1. Now see which load is greater. See which load is greater. Suppose this one is greater, so use it in the analysis. If this one is greater, use this in analysis. So this is up to you. You have to calculate both the things, and do not forget about factor of safety. And somebody asked me a question maybe day before yesterday, that which material to decide for the manufacturing. It's manufacturing, the knuckles manufacturing, mild steel or aluminum. Now you got the load, you see what is best preferable to you. If you are going for aluminum, which manufacturing process do you follow, which sort of material will you use for it, because the software gives you every property of the material. So you can refer to the properties and you can just see which material is preferable to you. And just remember, you are a step closer to the Champions Trophy. Okay, now moving on to the longitudinal load transfer. Before that, give me a moment so that I just drink some water. Kapil, Naitik and Suraj. Just I'll answer your questions once the session is over. Till then, hang on. Just need to finish up the things quickly and we'll come to your questions. Okay, so now longitudinal load transfer. Okay, this is the case for longitudinal load transfer when your vehicle is traveling and suddenly you apply the brakes. So here, this center of gravity, this is height of center of gravity. This is again the forward acceleration and the force, and this is change in the load. This is wheelbase. This is A, B that you calculated yesterday. So you have H, you have A, you have B, you have L, and you have W also. You need to calculate delta W. This is 0.0. When you see 0.0, just take moments about 0.0. This is the thing which I have observed about 0.0. So take moments about 0.0. Now delta Wx, which is in the forward, the change of weight in the forward direction multiplied by L, total wheelbase, will be equal to H into Wax. So Ax is your forward acceleration or longitudinal acceleration, which is your acceleration actually. Now W you know, H you know, L you know, you can calculate delta W. So simple. This will give you 1%, and similarly you can calculate for the acceleration also. At the time of acceleration also. This is at the time of braking. You can calculate it at the time of acceleration also. So now Shivam, you got. I hope you got the answer. Now, if you go in the reverse direction, keep fixing the change in load transfer. Now you can come up with the acceleration to avoid lifting. I hope you got my answer now. Okay. Now I will share this document with you, and this complete document. This document has CG location. This has lateral load transfer. This has longitudinal load transfer, and this has chassis stiffness too. This has corner, the banking moments, and basically the effects of banking. So effect banking is when the turn is there and the slope is there at the same time. And what else does it have? It has the CG for the sprung weight also. So you can study this document. This is really helpful, and it will give you the almost all the calculations required for your vehicle dynamics, except for the suspension. So far, braking, physics of braking is done, and your loads on wheels, it's done. Considerations for designing, is done. Rule book is done, and steering is left. So those, there is nothing much in the part of steering, but yes, you need to satisfy the requirement of the software. So the ones those who are working in CATIA, I have a video. I'll share the video with you guys. You can draw some line diagrams, and you can just see whether your steering will work or not. So related to the steering, there are the calculations for turning radius and all. Before that we go into discussion, I will just like to discuss three cases that Ackermann has defined. So Case 1 is when there is a vehicle, tire 1, tire 2 and tire 3, tire 4. When the inner wheel, this is inner wheel, the inner wheel is always the wheel about which a turn is being taken. When the inner wheel takes larger amount of turn as compared to the outer wheel. So this is Ackermann. Now there is one case when these are the rear wheels, these are the front wheels. So this is outer wheel, this is inner wheel. The case 1 is where it's known as Ackermann geometry. Ackermann geometry. Now this is case 2 when turn taken by both the front wheels is equal. This is known as parallel Ackermann. The case 3rd is when the outer wheel takes more amount of turn as compared to the inner wheel. This is known as reverse Ackermann. Now just you need to understand, study about these three positions and understand which one is necessary for you, and just try to see which one would you be using in your system. And now this arrangement will give you, after this arrangement you will be calculating inner wheel angle, outer wheel angle, turning radius, track width, wheelbase. Okay, I'll tell you the formula for the turning radius calculations. I haven't told it yet. So see, this is one thing that you analyzed and imagined and then reconstructed your research and developed data, and you came up with a wheelbase and track width. Okay, that was one. Now you fix either inner wheel angle and or outer wheel angle, either one of them, and you keep on changing the values. I'll tell you what is the relation between these two. So you keep on changing the values and optimize the turning radius. So these parameters are related to each other. Suppose you calculated something in the beginning. Now perform iterations. Iteration 1, you fixed inner wheel angle and you calculated outer wheel angle, you fixed track width, you calculated turning radius. So suppose turning radius, whichever you calculated, is not satisfactory. So fix turning radius which you think will be satisfactory and try to recalculate the other things. So whatever the scenario is good for you, just do that and make a